Dad's strong leadership kept the small bank open by Frederick Olson, Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. My apologies if I said that wrong. From 1925 until his death in 1938, my father was president of the Wauwatosa State Bank outside Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Banks had to close during the previous panics and depressions, but the Great Depression was particularly harsh on financial institutions. Few Americans had participated in the orgy of the stock market speculation that preceded the crash, but many had deposited their savings in banks for rainy days. For many people, that was now important. By 1934, banks were hard-pressed to pay off depositors on demand, and many were forced to close. Depositors were increasingly nervous and angry. "It's our money," they'd say. "Why can't we get it out?" Unfortunately, the prosperity of the 1920s made some bankers less prudent than they should have been with the people's money. There was no federal insurance for deposits, as there is today. As the Depression deepened, so did my father's concern. As a bank officer director, he had a substantial investment in bank stock. If the bank closed, he would not only have to forfeit the value of his stock, but match the value in cash to pay off depositors. But worries about his own liability were incidental. My father's primary concern was for the depositors. During one tense period, my father almost dreaded going to work, lest he find a long line of depositors demanding their money. I suspect those worries shortened his life. Runs on banks could occur whenever another local bank closed. No matter how strong the bank was, it couldn't withstand the demands of a large number of depositors for their cash. It had too much money tied up in loans and investments. A bank's best safeguard was reputation for solvency and conservative practices, and my father's bank had done that. But it wasn't easy to maintain a tiny bank when big banks were in trouble, and the bank down the street was going through the ringer. The lender of last resort. In 1931, Herbert Hoover persuaded Congress to create the Reconstruction Finance Corporation as a federal lender of last resort for financial institutions and businesses. Banks threatened with liquidation were encouraged to use their assets to obtain RFC loans. Every bank in Milwaukee County that survived the Depression borrowed from the RFC sooner or later, except my father's bank. He filed a vassal with about $250,000 in the bank securities and took them by train to Chicago to gain prior RFC loan approval in case of emergency. But his bank never had to ask for the RFC for the money, and he was justifiably proud of that. When FDR took office, he ordered all banks temporarily closed on his inauguration day to forestall for their bank runs until each bank could be reviewed and approved for reopening. On that historic Saturday morning, my father sweated out the closing order. He had little cash in his pocket, but because of his position, he felt he couldn't withdraw even a few dollars from his own account to tide us over the weekend. Wauwatosa State Bank reopened after government agency reviewed his balance sheets and assets. Later that year, my father asked the state banking commissioner for permission to pay a dividend, an almost unprecedented request. The bank was making money in spite of the Depression.